Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm truly delighted and honored that Dr. Peter Marks has kindly agreed to join us today. Dr. Marks is a director at the Center for Biologic Evaluation and Research at the US Food and Drug Administration. CBER is responsible for approval of vaccines, biologics, biosimilars, among others. Being at the helm of affairs, the contribution by Dr. Marks to the global fight against COVID is remarkable. Early during the pandemic, he was a key member to help jumpstart some of the research on vaccines that needed to happen. His ideas eventually became the multi-billion dollar federal program, Operation Warp Speed, that has supported many of the leading vaccine candidates. Dr. Mark has a graduate degree in cell and molecular biology. He also has a medical degree from New York University. He has a wide ranging experience in academics and also with the industry. He joined the FDA in 2012 as the deputy director and became the center director in January 2016. Thank you, Dr. Marks, for gracing us with your presence. With great pleasure, I now invite Dr. Marks to deliver the keynote.
Thanks, Shakti, for such a kind introduction. So, what I'd like to talk about is what we've done in the United States to help uh, deploy the vaccines during this COVID-19 pandemic. And the important thing here for us at FDA is that we have a role to play in vaccine development across the life cycle of vaccine development. So we not only start off with manufacturers at the very beginning when they start the development of their vaccines and they don't even have a regulatory filing yet, and talk to them about their development plans. We then follow that through the entire process, and we continue to do post-marketing surveillance. We're also involved in strain selection and reference standard production when appropriate. We do lot release. And all of this is done ultimately to help ensure public confidence in vaccines, which at least in the United States is one of the most important things that we're dealing with right now, because we really need people to be willing to take vaccines, and we need to overcome vaccine hesitancy. One of the things I like to show is how we have sped up vaccine development. Many people wonder how we have taken something that normally takes 3 or 4 years and we've done it in less than a year. And basically, it's simply by getting rid of dead space that normally is in vaccine development. Normally in traditional vaccine development, one does phase 1 and then stops, looks, and then does phase 2, stops, looks, and then goes to phase 3. And one waits till very late in the process in order to actually scale up the manufacturing process. For the vaccine development for COVID-19 vaccines, however, we've done seamless trials where we've gone from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 without any dead space in between. And while those trials were going on, we've watched as manufacturers have tried to do their scale up of manufacturing, anticipating that they were going to be successful. Now, they didn't know they would be, and so they were making vaccine at risk. But in a pandemic with so many lives being lost, that is a very reasonable risk to take. So really, the top line messages here is that vaccine development has been accelerated without cutting corners. In the United States, we've helped do this through production of 2 guidance documents, one on the licensure and development of COVID vaccines, and one on our emergency use authorization, which is the way we can make an investigational product widely available as an unapproved product in our country. And that's how the current 2 vaccines that are deployed have been made available. We have said, as part of our emergency use authorization for vaccines, that we would require them to come from, with the knowledge that they came from well done clinical trials. And we said that we'd have to have clear and compelling evidence from large, well-designed phase 3 clinical trials. We wanted to have a clear evaluation of the quality, safety, and efficacy of the vaccines. We've taken these to public advisory committee meetings so that people could see through a transparent process what we were doing to evaluate them. And we are doing enhanced post-deployment surveillance to make sure that we see any emerging safety concerns and we can address them. The safety monitoring that we're doing includes passive monitoring through our traditional vaccine adverse event reporting system, also known as VAERS, and also the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has put in place the vSafe text monitoring system for COVID-19 vaccine safety. We have active surveillance that is going and looking for adverse events through the vaccine safety data link, the clinical immunization safety assessment. Both of those are run by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And at FDA, we have a large database system called the Sentinel BEST system, which covers more than 100 million lives and is linked to the electronic health record. And we're monitoring about 15 safety outcomes of interest. These are not known adverse events with these vaccines, but these are ones that have been seen with other vaccines that might be of interest. So just to very quickly say, in the United States, we currently have 2 authorized vaccines, one from Pfizer-BioNTech and one Moderna. They happen to both be mRNA vaccines. Obviously, there are a number of other vaccines in development. The ones that we have in the United States include the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, the Janssen vaccine. The Janssen vaccine has recently submitted an emergency use authorization request, which is pending. And then there are protein subunit vaccines, such as the Novavax and Sanofi vaccines that are also in development. The Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna trials were both large randomized clinical trials. You can see that for Pfizer BioNTech, it was over 40,000 people. For Moderna, it was over 30,000 people. For us in the United States, it was very important that the trial enrollment matched the diversity of our population, and indeed for both of these vaccines, it did. The efficacy for both of these vaccines was quite remarkable, with 94 to 95% overall efficacy, and efficacy that only tailed off very slightly as the population got older. So very encouraging, and vaccines that were also effective against severe COVID-19, a very important feature. That they do come with some side effects, and particularly after the second dose of the vaccines, there tend to be a fair amount of injection site pain, which is transient, mostly mild to moderate. And then there are more systemic symptoms that can occur, such as fatigue, headache, muscle pains, chills, joint pain, fever, flu-like symptoms that generally resolve within a day and are generally mild to moderate. That being said, in the United States, we're trying to tell people that after they get the second dose, they should probably plan on having a relatively easy day when they get the second dose of these mRNA vaccines. One of the emerging things we did see with the deployment of these vaccines have been some severe allergic reactions. These were anaphylactic reactions that we first saw in the United Kingdom, but then we saw in the United States when they were deployed. We note that these vaccines should not be administered to anyone who has a known history of severe allergic reaction to any component of the vaccine, and one of those components is polyethylene glycol. And we are always having appropriate medical treatment available for severe allergic reactions where these vaccines are administered. Now, one good piece of news is that the rate of these allergic reactions seems to be settling out at a rate that is somewhere at 1 in 100,000 to 1 in 200,000 individuals vaccinated, or even lower. And we'll continue to monitor that. One of the final things I'll mention is that as we're all thinking about COVID-19, we are going to have to address the COVID-19 variants. We are very much right now in the United States thinking about how we will issue guidance to help manufacturers know how to change their vaccines and what they'll need to do in terms of clinical studies to decide what and when they can add a component to their vaccine. One of the good pieces of news, though, is as we're considering this, we're not likely to require clinical outcome studies, in other words, large-scale randomized clinical trials. It will more likely be smaller immunogenicity studies. So just to summarize, we've managed to shorten development timelines for vaccines without compromising vaccine safety or efficacy. We've tried to follow as transparent a public process as we can so that we can increase confidence in these vaccines, because we feel like this evaluation of safety and efficacy in the public eye will help people accept these vaccines. And that's really what we'll need to do to help bring this pandemic to an end. Thanks so much for listening.
That was indeed an insightful presentation, Dr. Marks. Thank you so much. Also, thank you for having agreed to take some questions from us. To start with, I wanted to ask for your views on the equitable distribution of vaccines and the role India can play in complementing the global supply.
Thanks for that question. You know, this is clearly a situation where we are in a global pandemic. We have to get this under control, not just in any given nation, but across all nations. And so I think we will need to collaborate, and we will need to do our part in the United States to try to help be able to export as much vaccine as we can, but we will need India and others to do all of the production that they can to help us globally. And so I think we are really in very good mutual alignment here in this need to use our mutual pharmaceutical capacities to help bring an end to this pandemic.
You also spoke about the precautions that FDA is taking to ensure that the vaccines are safe and efficacious. But there is still a public inertia in taking vaccines. How are you addressing that?
We're doing that through outreach and trying to understand what each group has as concerns. We found that different groups tend to have different concerns about vaccines. And so understanding what individuals need in terms of information or in terms of seeing others take the vaccine is very important. In some populations, it's a matter of providing the information about the safety and the efficacy of the vaccines. In other populations, though, it's really about it's more of a person-to-person thing, where if somebody knows that somebody that they respect has taken the vaccine, they will go and take the vaccine. So I think we're in a situation where we need to use all the tools we can, provide the information when we need to, rely on social networks when we can, and also, importantly, combat misinformation about vaccines. In the United States, we've had some pretty bad episodes of people spreading misinformation, and we are not afraid at FDA, and others are also not afraid to go after and stop that misinformation from spreading.
A connected question to this: the life sciences industry on the whole has played a very crucial role during this pandemic. Be it drugs, be it diagnostics, be it devices. So how do you think this has the contribution from the industry has changed the perception, the public perception on the industry itself?
Yeah, I think that when we come out of this, the vaccine hesitancy and some of the look of people towards what industry does will probably change to a more positive light. I think it's very clear that industry has gone out of their way here, often to make sure that things were developed more quickly, production has happened more quickly. And I hope that ultimately there's a more positive perception of what the pharmaceutical industry brings to the table in terms of helping human health.
Fantastic. United States and India have shared a long history of association in the life sciences sector. Particularly the affordable generic segment. And, it is a matter of immense pride that the state that I come from, Telangana, has the highest number of FDA-approved sites globally. We have about 5% of the total FDA-approved sites. And, we are the only state in the world to have more than 200 FDA-approved sites. How would you think that such strategic global relationships can be strengthened to ensure better healthcare to the global population?
Well, I think throughout this pandemic, it's become clear that the more we have dialogue with one another, the more we can find collaborations, the stronger we'll be overall. So I'm hoping that as we come to the post-pandemic period, we'll start to have more dialogue, more collaborations, and that will actually make us all stronger in terms of our ability to respond to future challenges, and even just to go about our business in normal times.
Yeah, talking about affordable generic segment, I also wanted to touch upon biosimilars, which again is an area of interest for India. To what extent do you see the market changing with biosimilars in the next few years? And a connected question to this is, I believe there is apparent slowdown in the evaluation mechanism of biologics and biosimilars due to the pandemic. How are you bringing this back to speed?
Good questions, both. I think we'll anticipate that there will be more biosimilars as people get back up to speed. Also, because I think we're finally in the United States, people are getting more experience with them. But you're absolutely right that the pandemic has slowed things down somewhat. They've slowed down people's ability to bring forward their applications, and they've also slowed us down a little bit at FDA. We have been working on kind of recovery plans, and I think hopefully within the coming months, we'll start to speed up again as we move hopefully to a post-pandemic period.
India has one of the largest number of the biosimilar approvals. However, a very few Indian companies have been able to penetrate the US or European markets. What is your advice to the Indian, biosimilar makers?
Persistence. Persistence. Don't give up. I think persistence here. I think it's challenging in the biosimilar market for everyone trying to get in it right now, and I think it's going to become hopefully easier as people become more familiar with biosimilars. I think part of what we're dealing with here are the people, the innovator products have a lot of following, and it takes a while to break into that market.
How is CBER helping drug regulatory agencies across the world, in other countries, in their examination of new applications for biosimilars?
Yeah, so we actually don't have a tremendous number of biosimilar applications because we do not handle monoclonal antibodies or therapeutic biologics in our center. We handle vaccines, blood products, gene and cell therapies. That's in our sister center, and I know that the Center for Drugs that handles those is trying, they really have tried to help out on a global regulatory basis, just like we're trying to work on a global regulatory basis to help with cell and gene therapies, because we believe, and we have had some conversations with our Indian colleagues about this, because we believe that harmonization will be good for all of us, that redoing regulatory work or redoing studies to satisfy different regulators, that just adds costs to development and tends to discourage innovation.
I have two follow-up questions on this. One is about the regulatory, structure itself, and the second one on cell and gene therapy, which you touched upon. I'll go with the regulatory one first. Do you foresee a world where there'll be a single regulatory standard to be followed throughout?
What a great question. That maybe is years in the future. I hope we can start to work in that direction. I think, the International Conference of Harmonization has tried to work that way for certain things. I guess, and you have WHO, that it's not a regulatory organization that works in this direction. My hope is that we can gradually make progress in that direction. It may not be something that will happen tomorrow, but every bit of progress that we can make, I think, is helpful, and we'll take it.
And the second question I had was on the cell and gene. There are newer innovations that are coming, but then these are increasingly getting out of reach for patients. For instance, the gene therapy that was approved recently. How do you think this anomaly can be corrected?
The cost issue is what you're talking about, or the
the cost, affordability.
I would say the following, that this is where we as a regulatory agency we're leaning into helping with manufacturing, and because I think until we see better manufacturing, more robust manufacturing, reduced development costs, we're going to continue to see these prices that are just not sustainable. So we're trying to help in the development of more efficient, effective manufacturing processes, because if the cost of goods could be reduced by half an order to an order of magnitude, then gene therapy would be potentially a more viable option. Because for some diseases right now, gene therapy is actually cost effective, if the cost of the gene therapy itself came down somewhat.
Sure. A personal question. You've played several roles in your career. You've wide-ranging experience, right from studying internal medicine, doing research, being in academia, and being in industry, and now at SIBA. What is your guidance? What is your take on the collaboration between different stakeholder groups? Be it healthcare, be it academia, research, and industry.
So I think the most important thing I've learned is that there's no one best in this groups. We have to respect each other. We each bring something to the table, academics, industry, and government. And I think we work best when we collaborate together, we respect one another, and we work together. And I think that is a lesson coming from this pandemic, that we are very strong when we all work together. And so I don't view any one of these as superior to the other. I view us as colleagues working together.
Perhaps the last question is technology is disrupting, across industry, the revolution. I wanted to ask you how FDA is keeping pace with the rapid technological advancement.
So at FDA, we have a researcher reviewer model where many of our reviewers also do applied scientific research. They attend conferences when you can actually attend conferences in person. Now they're attending them virtually. And they stay very much in tune with the latest research. That's very helpful, particularly in gene therapies, cell therapies, where every few months there's a new major advance that we have to keep track of. So we find that model works very well for us, and we'll continue it.
Yeah, we're very hopeful that we will have you with us physically during the next event. This time it has to be virtual. But there is so much more we would like to talk to you about, but I'm afraid this is all the time that we have. It was lovely talking to you, Dr. Marks. And thank you so much for joining us at 18th BioAsia.
Thank you very much, Shakti.
Pleasure.
Thank you everyone for tuning in with us today. Moving on, we have our next panel discussion on virtually connected healthcare. And I'll welcome the moderator for the session, Ms. Ridhima Kaul, Health Editor, Hindustan Times.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Ridhima Kaul, Health and Science Editor, Hindustan Times, and I welcome you all for BioAsia 2021. And the topic for our discussion is virtually connected healthcare, preparing for new realities. So let's begin. We have an eminent panel with us, and which I'm really happy to introduce. I mean, it's from different walks of life, not just India, but abroad as well. Let me introduce my panel panelists. The first one is Ms. Carmen Wen-Wilstrin, Chair, Top Sector, Life Sciences and Health Holland. Ms. Sangeeta Reddy, Joint MD, Apollo Hospitals. Ms. Debjani Ghosh, President, NASCOM. Mr. Kaiwan Movdawala, Partner Healthcare, EY India. And Mr. Arnaud Bernier, Head of Global Health and Healthcare, World Economic Forum. I welcome you all. And the topic for today is virtually connected healthcare. So till some time ago, I think virtual healthcare wasn't something which was very popular, though all of us would have loved to have our consultations online or probably make more use of digital health space. But it wasn't as big as it suddenly last 1 year, and things have changed, and like how. So can you please, all of you, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Because before that, it was in its basic form, but COVID has changed the scenario significantly, as now many government hospitals are also offering online consultations, something that was unheard of some time ago, like a year ago. Private hospitals still have been big on telemedicine. I remember, please correct me, Ms. Reddy, your hospital, Apollo Group, has been quite big. I mean, I remember different countries, not just in India, within India, it's outside India also, you have been holding these sessions where doctors have been contributing, guiding locally people there, and they have done a lot of things. But in the public sector, something like this, it wasn't heard of. But now we are making an effort. Things are changing. The pandemic has led to virtualization, if I may call it, of a significant part of patient journey. So apart from several opportunities, there are also emerged challenges which we are trying to deal with. So there are many challenges we have to face it. And in today's discussion, we'll try to address these issues with our expert panel. So let me start with Ms. Reddy. I mean, if we talk about virtually connected healthcare, so what is it that comes to your mind? What are the things that we need to do, the focus areas?
So actually, the first thing that comes to my mind is the fact that using this technology, and more importantly, the enablement and the empowerment of the health systems, we can ensure that no individual is denied care, at least in terms of the ability to reach out to a doctor. Because as is popularly said, geography has become history. You can literally reach any part of the world using the power of technology. That is the first one. And the implications of these is that the medical shortage of doctors should significantly reduce because you are able to multitask, reach out in environments, because as we all know, we have about 80% of our specialists distributed among 40 large cities, whereas a bulk of our population does live in the rural areas. So the ability to access care is the first thing that comes to mind. But immediately after that is a host of other things. The care is shifting from the hospital to the clinic to the home to a virtual, ubiquitous 24/7 care. It's using technology. You will now add sensors, and those sensors will be able to not only do teleconsults, but also be able to monitor the patient extensively. So home care will transform. Care for the elderly will transform. The next is that, again, using this connectivity, you will create what is called a continuum of care. So the effectiveness of seeing a single record from the general practitioner in the districts to the super specialist in the cities, and then back again to the GP to take care of that individual. This could be one seamless continuum of care enabled by a common view of a single record. And if we move that record to the patient, then we involve the patient and his family or her family also into care. And the final one is, if we're treating better, focusing on prevention and early detection, gathering this data right, in addition to the entire scenario I described, AI models will start emerging because you've captured the data. So biosurveillance, further early detection, moving of skills from a high-end doctor to the middle level, and from the middle level doctor into the nursing, and from nursing to general duty rural healthcare workers, this will move. So the skill shifting will happen, access to care will enhance, early detection will happen, and the care settings will change. All these are just, very early days, but I'm very excited because you rightly said, we've been working on telemedicine for the last 20 years. And I think the development that we've seen happen in the last 3 years, telescoped what we did in 17, and the development of the last 10 months telescoped, what we did in the last 3 and went beyond. So the power of this is quite significant. Of course, we need to use it right. I'm not going to go into that. You have a fantastic panel and a lot of people to answer these questions, but suffice to say, we're committed, we're excited, and we will use the best of technology to continue to deliver the best of care.
Since you talked about technology, so we have Ms. Ghosh with us, who is in a better position to talk about technologies. Ms. Ghosh, what does your mind, first thing that comes to your mind when we talk about virtually connected healthcare? Where are we?
I think Sangeeta just said it, and said it so beautifully in terms of the role technology will play in healthcare. See, the digitization of healthcare is something we had been witnessing for a very long time, but I have to admit it was going at a pretty slow pace. And I think what happened during the pandemic, the last 12 months, is that it got accelerated significantly. The three areas where I do believe we will see the maximum impact is, ensuring that it's basically about the democratization of technology. It's about the democratization of technology to ensure that we lower the barriers to access, especially at the last mile. I think that's one of the biggest challenges India faces, last mile access to healthcare. And this is where I believe technology can play a critical role. As a country, as we get more comfortable with data analytics, data usage, I believe that we will see a significant shift to more personalized healthcare. And last but not the least, I think technology will make healthcare much more humane. A lot of the technology that can be used, like diagnostic tools, etc., to do things like the routine part of diagnosing certain ailments, etc., they can do it much better, much more efficiently. These technologies will now leave room for doctors to do what doctors should be doing, which is giving personal care, spending time with patients. So I do believe that technology will actually start the trend of much more human healthcare. But I just want to make one point, which is this journey about digitizing healthcare or the automation of digital transformation of healthcare has to be about humans. We have to make it, we have to put humans right at the center of the story. It's not technology. And I cannot emphasize that any stronger. I'm sure all of you are aware that in Jan 2017, a 112-page proposal was submitted to the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority in Washington, describing a strategy for stopping pandemics, future pandemics. It outlined a number of vaccine technologies to pursue, including mRNA, etc. And they recommended that they needed 180 scientists, doctors, etc., and a budget of 595 million over 10 years. So technology, especially with its advancement today, has tremendous predictive capabilities, and it can actually be used to predict a lot of the problems that we are going to that's coming our way, not just pandemics but climate change, etc. The key point is, are we as humans ready to act on these predictions? Many experts had predicted that a pandemic is coming our way, but they
Yes.
could not persuade anyone to do anything about it. So technology is an enabler, it's
Hmm.
there, but it is about us humans and the choices we make. The decision is ours to take, whether we use the technology right and whether we act on the insights that the technology is giving us. So I just want to make that point that at the center of this story of the digitization of healthcare um, are we humans. I mean, it can't be about technology, it's about us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. It's like, as you rightly said, technology is an enabler, but we are the humans driving it. So yes, of course, there's a lot of convincing that needs to be done at that point. Kaman, we come to you. What is it that comes to your mind when we say, virtually connected healthcare, preparing for the new realities? So what do you see what we are preparing for?
Well, I think to couple to the last speaker, I think indeed some people did predict it. I think with current technology we can not only predict it, but I guess also early detect it, which makes it a little bit more easy to I think follow. So I would like to refer especially to a project that's been started at the start of the pandemic. It's called VODAM. It's a virus outbreak data network. And what we're doing in an international context is that we make sure all the data are accessible for others, are following a kind of international standard. And I think that standard is very much also according to your digital health mission. I think I looked it up at a website. I think it's very much like the FAIR standard that we're using in Europe. And we are actually not sharing the data, but we are sharing algorithms with certain hypotheses about the reaction of certain drugs on certain symptoms of the COVID patients, and we can also use that for early detection. So I think technology will help us in the future, and also the digitalization and data sharing will help us in early detect this kind of pandemics. But also, if you look into the development of new vaccines and drugs, and actually I was a little bit more than a year ago, I was visiting Delhi with a big Dutch delegation on the health summit, and we were talking a lot about drug development and of course also specific vaccines. And as a result of that, also a number of new European consortium together with India did started on new developments. But that has been changing, and basically the COVID changed that at all. So still these projects are ongoing, but I think it's great to see that India has now 2 vaccines in production for not only for India but also for the rest of the world. And this development has been going much faster than we expected, of course, a couple of years ago, but even a little bit more than a year ago when I was in Delhi discussing this. So what you see also there is that sharing the knowledge and building on existing knowledge and large long-term investments, but also sharing knowledge and data also with our regulatory organizations like where we have in the EMA in Europe, is speeding this development up. And I think also into that context, I think speeding up the development of new vaccines and also new drugs will be helped a lot by further digitalizations, standards about data, but also collaboration. And I think every country wants to be as independent as they can, but I think mutual dependencies really speed up things. And I think we've seen it in the past, and I'm very sure we will see it in the future as well.
So my next question would be for Kaiwan, your chance. I mean, what do you have to say to that? I believe most of them have said what the crux of it. So, but breaking it down, what do you see? How are we preparing ourselves for new realities?
See, Ridhima, the context and the contours of the healthcare system is rapidly changing across the world. What we're seeing is a fundamental shift in the imperatives for policymakers, providers, and public, which has led to the emergence of 3 key performance indicators for the health system. 1, cost of care. Second is health outcome. And third is health consumerism, right? And that's the key performance indicators of the health system of the tomorrow. A natural consequence, or one may argue, that a key driver of this changing imperative is the unprecedented opportunities unleashed by rapidly evolving capabilities in technology. All that Sangeeta said, Debjani mentioned. But at the fundamental level, I think I just want to focus on one aspect, which is really about technology helping us in predicting the unpredictable. And what I mean by that is that medical science has made incredible advancement over the last century. But at the same time, it's also true that modern medicine, in my view, is still largely a probabilistic science. It's in the early stages of evolution with a limited understanding of human physiology, health, and sickness. Even the best cardiac surgeons have told me that they don't understand more than 15 to 20% of the human heart, right? And as is the case with any probabilistic science, I think the pace of advancement is strongly correlated to the availability of a very credible and comprehensive data set. And I think this is the power of data that's going to be unleashed by these digital capabilities, which is completely unimaginable, right? Which really can help us consolidate, analyze, and also leverage for sharper intelligence and insights into research and development. And one of the key initiatives, obviously, the National Digital Health Mission, which really endeavors to create a unique health ID for every citizen, which really brings together this distributed health information across the health continuum, as Sangeeta mentioned, right? And which will actually collectively be a more powerful catalyst than anything else for really advancing, healthcare in the country and also globally. So therefore, I think just to conclude, I think data is the bedrock of the health system of the future and can really revolutionize advancement in products, therapies, diagnostics, therapy, the whole medicines for pharma, med device, and providers.
Absolutely. I think this is just the core that you just touched upon, that this is what is the future that we are talking about. Now, Arnaud has also joined us. So I would want to talk about it. I mean, we are talking about you're from the World Economic Forum. So how do you see things changing across the globe?
Well, I largely so agree with all the benefits being mentioned before. I'm not going to repeat them. Indeed, we've seen an increase in the number of teleconsultations and the consultation in the UK in the first wave. We'd like to also expand to all the diseases and cardiology, the ICU, all of those technologies are proven to be very essential, and they need to be protected. A few pitfalls need to be avoided. There could be a bad and so in first thing is we need to think about also addressing very, very rapidly the security. There has been 154 data breaches involving more than 500 individuals in the last quarter of 2020. This is to be compared to 40 in the last 2019. So in the current period, we've seen proliferation of data breaches. The second point that we can't ignore is that 47% of the world's population don't have access to affordable broadband. I think as long as we will not access affordable access to broadband, I think half of the world will not reap the benefits and the fruits we were discussing before. The third point I would like to make is about the use cases. I think telehealth need to be organized in such a way where we protect access to physical healthcare for use cases that cannot be solved with telehealth. And this has not been perfectly managed during the crisis, as evidenced by the fact that more than 60% of the world's cancer has been missed. I'm thinking in particular about breast cancer, colorectal cancer, and lung cancer, all of which being missed by more than 60% in the diagnostic phase, according to a study of 528 oncologists in Western Europe. So those things need to be corrected. It's not like all use cases will lend themselves to telehealth. And last but not least, it was mentioned before, a huge opportunity to leverage data in the anticipation and surveillance phase for tracking new variants or new viruses based on decentralized genomic networks. So in summary, considerable opportunities, but considerable issues to be addressed for them to reach their maximum potential.
Since everybody is talking about data, I would want to go to Debjani. Debjani, data obviously is the tool, is the powerful tool that we have. But there has been a huge concern about data safety. That is one thing that everybody seems to be concerned about. And we are talking a lot about leakages and all. We need to plug that, especially in a country like India, where it's commonly accessible and it's very easy to hack into the system. So how do you see we protect that?
We need to evolve a culture of data utilization in this country. As you said, data is easily available, etc. But we don't pay a lot of attention to these things. I think we have to start paying attention, much more attention to where are we sharing data? What is it being used for? How will it benefit us? I think we have to start getting more aware about these things, and definitely we have to start driving the advocacy. Also, as companies, we have to start getting much more responsible about what data are we collecting, for how long, what purpose will it be used for, ensuring that it gets used for the purpose that we are communicating and nothing else. So, I think, see, India has worked very hard to come out with the data privacy guidelines. We've also worked to create the draft policy for non-personal data usage. It's high time that these now become a reality in the country, because they will sort of set the framework on how data can be used safely and securely. But that said, I do believe that as a country, we are obsessing. We should be obsessing about security, no doubt, but we cannot just obsess about security. We have to obsess about data utilization. To me, that's the bigger problem. As a country, we are not focused enough on utilizing data to the fullest possible extent and as safely as possible. Security should be built into the design. It goes hand in hand. But what India needs is a national data utilization framework and strategy. I'll give a simple example. There are so many good healthcare pilots happening all over India. Each state is doing its own pilot in health tech using AI or some other technology. Now, as we well know, data is the fuel to these technologies. the more data and good quality data that we can feed into the system, the better are the algorithms, the better are the predictive capabilities, the better are the analytics and the insights. So what we have to do is connect the dots, because if we do not connect the dots and we continue to have such a fragmented data usage system across the country, we will never leverage, forget the full potential. We are not even going to get to 10% of the potential that these technologies can offer. So India strongly needs a national data utilization framework backed by strong security policies and guidelines, which are inwards. For example, one of the things we should be doing immediately is identifying the most important data sets in each of the key verticals. For example, NASSCOM has done a study which shows that in the next 5 years, the right usage of AI can unlock around $500 billion for the Indian GDP. And there are key verticals that we have called out, and healthcare, of course, is a key vertical. Now, it's important to identify national data sets in each of these verticals and come out with clear protocols on how, where will the data be stored, quality of data, standards that sort of define the quality of data, interoperability, utilization, security, all of it. It's like a stack. Think of it like a stack, right? But it's extremely important for us to come out with a very well documented, well defined utilization strategy with security built into it, or every aspect of it. But our entire approach in the country to data cannot be starting just with privacy and security first, because we will not then make the best use of the data. So that right balance is extremely important.
Okay. And do you think that Government of India's push for digital healthcare, because we are seeing a lot of it, they have come out with a draft policy also. So do you think it's the right time we begin with it, or we should have started earlier? What do you have to say?
It's pointless cribbing about when they started, how. It's just pointless unless you give me a time machine. So I'm glad that they have started. I think implementation is of utmost importance now. We have to walk the talk. We have to ensure we implement as fast as possible. And as we implement, we have to build scale into design. No more pilots. I mean, we've done enough pilots in this country. We have to move from a pilot mindset to a scale, to an impact mindset. And we have to build these into the design along with security, etc.
Okay, and I can see a couple of raised hands there. I'll go to Sangeeta first, and then Carmen, I'll come to you. Yes, Sangeeta, what do you have to say to that?
So very quickly adding, I completely agree with all the points that were made by Debjani. I just want to add that the government has been working on this for a while now, but the good thing is that this accelerated the problem, the solutioning, so to speak, and the entire Telemedicine Act, legalizing telemedicine, happened during the pandemic. The data sets for capture, the standards for use, etc., have been validated by the government, multiple working committees. I was in one of those, I chaired one of these committees as well. The standard for electronic health record is there. The one big point I wanted to make is that in healthcare, very important is the de-identification of personal data. And the fact that you can remove the name and use the case, the evolution of science for the benefit of science. So how did the patient progress? What is the medication interaction? Which medicine gave better efficacy? All these have to be studied. It's very valuable. It will help science progress. So we should de-identify the individual name and send this data in for scientific analysis. So I would really say that there's also a very large role for media to play, educating public in that they are not scared about their data and say that, somebody's going to know all things about me.
Yeah.
Put down the right framework, educate the providers on the proper use and data capture, educate the individuals not to be afraid of it, yet retain the power, and follow the ideology that it is personal owned and permission can be given, but the benefits of having this consolidated data and a continuum of care and a longitudinal health record far outweigh any of the risks. And I also want to say, I mean, we've gone through the ISO 27001 for data security at Apollo. So there are some standards available. Let's lay down those and try and move quickly towards it, because the positive effects of this are very, very high.
And Sangeeta, one more thing that I wanted to ask you is, when we are talking about introducing newer technologies which are there at our disposal, we also have to think about, especially in a country like India, the cost effectiveness of it. You know, healthcare anyway is very, very expensive for most of the Indians, because we are paying out of the pocket. We are still not into that insurance model, though Ayushman Bharat is there and things are changing gradually, but still a lot of people are paying out of the pocket. So I want to know, I mean, how do we balance this? New technologies, as well as, you know, to make it cost effective also at the same time, so that people don't run up huge bills in hospitals and they don't get scared of hospitals.
So Ridhima, when we say technology, it's a kind of a wide sweeping step.
Exactly.
You know, taking a basic CT scan and going all the way up to 64 slice, 640 slice, you know, these are the kind of evolutions which have happened. Where you can manage with the lower end and therefore save some costs, yes, I agree. But then we need to have what is called the appropriate setting. If somebody has a high-end major serious ailment, you definitely need technology. Technology, in as much as it relates to data capture, interaction, operations and efficiency and telehealth, is one spectrum. And the technology related to diagnostic, robotic surgery, treatment, intensive care relates to another spectrum. But at the end of the day, I would say that you cannot put a price tag on life. Even one life saved because you've achieved the higher end. And in India, we're actually very blessed, because the numbers very often enable the return on investment. So a very famous study showed a day in the life of an MRI across the world. And an average MRI in the United States is used for about 5 cases a day. And in UK, it moves up to about 7 cases a day. And it's very efficient, is, you know, the interpretation. And you move to India and we're doing 35 to 40 patients a day. But so we flog the technology. So I think it is something that we should be very clear that let's move forward if we are pushing to capture the value of that data at the end of the day. Because if we build powerful AI models based on the volume of data, we can share these models with the world. Like we've, you know, been able to very proudly share our vaccines with the world because of production at scale. It is, you know, be able to
volumes.
Exactly, think of using the volumes appropriately and not be held up on this cost conundrum. We can make it work.
Kaman, you had to add something to that, what Devjani was saying, please. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Well, actually, a few points. I think I fully agree with Mrs. Ghosh that I think in general patients do agree if their data are used for benefit of either themselves or other patients. And I think that's and I think sometimes our laws are actually too strict for that. If I speak for Europe, we have quite some severe privacy laws around data. But implementation of that is really a struggle. So I would fully support your plea, Mrs. Ghosh, to work on frameworks for the implementation of of privacy laws. If I may give an example, an average PhD who was working on a large public-private collaboration that I'm sharing here in the Netherlands, it takes a year out of his or her 4 years to get all the approvals in place, to really start the research on a specific question, year out of 4. So that's really awful and a loss of effort. So guidelines for implementations are really needed also in Europe. So I recently spoke to the European Commission about this. So also in Europe, we do not need more laws about privacy, into my view, but we need more frameworks for implementation of the existing laws, especially if you talked about in collaboration of public-private partnerships, where you work together with a company, you work together with governments, and you work together with clinical partners. So that's what I want to add.
And at the same time, where do you see the collaboration between countries, and among countries? Because all of us are trying to become self-reliant when it comes to diagnostics and drugs. You talked about the collaboration between India and the Netherlands on vaccines. So would you like to talk more about it, how we are going, how we are progressing forward?
Well, I think we have a long-term relationship already in the production, as I mentioned. We all know that with the Punala factory and plant. And I think there are a number of discussions about new projects right now, also with India, also in the European context, as I mentioned. So there are a number of new consortia being set up, and I expect that COVID will only speed it up further, into my view. And also I think it's not only on vaccines. I think it's also the basic knowledge. We still know not everything about our immune system. So I think there's still also a need to work together on building on the basic knowledge next to the development of vaccines.
Okay, and what role does technology play in here for you? I mean, where do you see the role it playing, the digitization as we are talking about here, which is the crux of our conversation today?
I think that's will be both the data sharing between the different partners. As I mentioned, if every researcher needs a year to be allowed to use data of different partners and so on, that's a year lost. So I think data sharing and the rules around that will help, but also the way we share data with other partners, like the regulatory partners. So we can share data in a much more standardized and also in a much more earlier phase in the development that can speed up the development of new drugs and vaccines, like we did during COVID. But that was more kind of, I think there was a lot of improvisation and goodwill of everybody also to speed things up. But we have seen now that we can do much more within a year that we've done in the past. So I think we really want to build further on that experience together to make that a kind of sustainable reduction of the throughput time of the new development of drugs and vaccines.
I'm not sure in villages how strong our networks are. I mean, if we allow them this facility of telemedicine facility in villages, how do they go about it? So these are the issues, these are practical issues that we'll be dealing with in future, I guess.
But to that point, Sangeeta, we need to also invest then in capability development of the people who will be working with these solutions, especially healthcare workers, etc. I think that's something we will need to put so much focus on than what we have even thought today. If this is the future, we definitely don't have the skills today on ground. And how do we build, just as the government is putting so much of focus on, say, IT industry to get reskilled, we will need to replicate that then in healthcare and other such verticals with as much urgency.
Thank you, Chaitanya. I completely agree with that. In fact, only last week, I raised this point to the Education Secretary and said that we not only need digital literacy for healthcare into the basic curriculum, but also there's an opportunity to create a whole new cadre of people who are telehealth enablers in doctor offices, in CSCs. But going back to Ridhma's point on connectivity, I want to tell you that I was pleasantly surprised. We partner with the Government of India for the Common Service Centers. And we're connected to 60,000 CSCs across the country and offer telehealth in those environments. And barring a few, I mean, under 2 to 3 of them, all of them have adequate bandwidth, support a telehealth consult very well. So I think there's, just a very exciting opportunity. I visualize that India's 500,000 primary healthcare centers can get connected with telehealth. In fact, we ran 250 centers in Andhra, where they were all telehealth enabled, electronic healthcare enabled, and data and information capture was perfect. In fact, we upload into the Chief Minister's dashboard every 3 minutes. So there's
as real time as it could get.
Exactly.
But the question very often, and I don't know well enough the situation in India, but I've come across all the situations. The problem is that you may have a good broadband network. It's very, very costly for the lowest income individuals.
Yes.
So they can't afford. And I feel to be made for low-income people, actually, should be part of the healthcare. I mean, broadband access should be the first thing that could be paid by a national health security system, because if you want people to actually leverage the new technology and they don't have the access, they will end up in the hospital.
True. That's actually one of the.
But that's where India will have to adopt creative approaches, because while there is definitely a plan to get broadband into every home, that's going to take a while, and we all know that. So in the meantime, one of the things we're seeing is, as Sangeeta said, healthcare centers are coming up in pretty much every village. You know, the government has CSCs, common service centers, in every village, which has good broadband connectivity, and they are available within 10 minutes, 15 minutes of wherever you live. And as long as we can have that approach, a community-led approach, to ensuring that every village, every district is getting connected to broadband, that's a good step. And I would, not wait for the perfect solution of getting broadband into home, which is hopefully someday we will get there, and someday soon. But at least we will have these solutions to start with.
I would like to go back to Kaiwan, because when we were discussing, we were snapped there. So yeah, if you could just continue with that. You left two verticals you were talking about.
Yeah, so we were talking about the cost of care, and one lens is the episodic or the transaction cost of healthcare, right? But the other is very important, which is the life cycle cost of healthcare, and which is where we need to make a move, and not just in India, globally, from a sick care to a healthcare system, right? And this overwhelming focus on hospital-based care, sick care, has been the cause of burgeoning health expenditures globally, and also increasing non-communicable disease burden from 30% of our disease burden of disease-adjusted life years to nearly 60% in the last 2 decades. And that's where I think technology can really revolutionize speed and accuracy of diagnosis and treatment, enable remote access, real-time monitoring, and most important, right, I think it can really shape effective interventions for preventive care. Right? Studies have shown that 50% of outcomes can be improved through behavioral change. And I think that's where technology really has that fulcrum role, right? So be it wearables, be it health apps, we spoke about genetics, molecular diagnostics, AI-enabled care. I think all of this is going to really help us navigate the journey from a sick care to a healthcare economy. I think what we are really seeing is coming together of multiple players, right? With domain expertise, where radical collaboration comes in, and you are able to really manufacture the most effective solution for the patient, for the best outcome at the lowest cost. And I think that's where technology will really play a very, very fundamental role in transforming our healthcare system.
Riddhima, I can give you an example of what Kaiwan was talking very briefly. Our diabetes solution. So what we have there is that the glucometer is connected to the mobile phone. The phone messages into the centralized call center, deposits information about the daily insulin on a central PHR, which is seen by the doctor, the dietitian, as well as the counselor. Adjust dose. They give counseling on exercise and diet. And, it's a long but well thought through process. But in 90 days, 82% of our patients bring their HbA1c under control.
Oh,
if you control your diabetes, you have controlled your complications down the road. So many models like this are emerging. We've been working with them for a while, but this is the answer to non-communicable disease and control.
And also, this also points to the fact that the patient, I mean, the crux of it,
absolutely,
the process, how the patient is involved in the process. Yeah, we are involving the patient much more than what we would earlier.
See, Riddhima,
certification can't happen by one 20-minute consult, once.
Exactly.
Ongoing engagement which creates the new behavior to the individual who, hopefully will no longer be a patient.
And also technology is at their disposal as well. I mean, a patient before he walks into a clinic probably knows a lot about his symptoms, and then doctor has a lot to answer these days. That's a common complaint I also come across with. Yes, Kavan, please, your turn.
Yep. I would like to ask a question, because what we see in the Netherlands is that a lot of the telemedicine has much to do with consults on a distance. So that's basically calling and video calling. The technology is being had. I think you said it as well. It's already 10 years old, even more. So I'm wondering, we are actually struggling quite a bit to bring that further in really home monitoring. So really bring a person much earlier out of the hospital into their home situation, monitor his or her from home, and then really avoid a lot of additional care and cost. So are you also struggling with the same, or is it different in India?
So can I answer?
Yes, it's your domain, totally.
Basically, we've been working on models of remote monitoring. We've done it in a one-off basis for many years now. But during COVID, and too much of this behavior has accelerated, but during COVID, we monitored over 15,000 patients using telehealth at home. We converted hotel rooms, over 5,000 hotel rooms were converted into hospital, non-acute, but enabling isolation and monitoring. And for this, we had almost 5,000 hotel rooms. So this suddenly accelerated and opened up the possibilities of what we can do. So now we are working on retraining a lot of staff, creating a general duty assistant, and connecting to a call center with a hospital and a nurse, re-engineering a device which is cost effective and can be kept at the home, which includes monitoring and video consult. And all this is really accelerated during this time period. So we are actually very excited about what has been done so far and what we will be able to do in the next few months.
Okay, thank you.
Great, Kavan, you were going to add something.
Yeah, just one point I just wanted to add to the patient aspect, right? We were talking about it,
sure.
right? And I think technology, right, unless it's deliberately controlled, has always advanced the cause of democracy, right? By neutralizing two things, the information skew, right? And platform for consolidation of the voice for individually powerless masses. And in India, historically, we've seen that there is a traditional power imbalance between the provider, physician, and the patient, right? And this is where, technology, and globally, we've seen platforms like Patient Like Me, etc., where the patient voice really has a say, and the patient can really, in a way, elevate to its rightful place in the ecosystem and really exercise its legitimate right in shaping the way they are treated and covered by providers, payers, and policymakers. And I think this trend is very, very good, and I think it means greater power in the hands of our patients, right? Just the way we have learned from the ancient Charak Samhita, Shushruta Samhita, where treating the patient with dignity, honesty, transparency, and kindness is the way to go.
Great. So today's discussion primarily, as I understood, it's more about how we have technologies. We have better technologies today than we had some time back, and how to implement them. That the time has come now to implement it. So before we end our session today, I would like to thank the panel for participating in this insightful discussion. And I request all the participants who have joined us for the session to stay tuned for the next one. I assure it's going to be equally exciting and interesting. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining in. Thank you, really, on behalf of BioAsia 2021. Thank you.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Wow.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.